Well, the Supreme Court struck down President Trump's tariffs today. In the decision, the justices ruled the Constitution very clearly gives Congress the power to impose taxes, which includes tariffs.
And in response this afternoon, the president signed an executive order to implement an additional 10% global tariff. And to help us sort this all out and the impact it could have on the economy is University of Chicago professor Stephen Durloff. Hello to you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
Of course. Let's talk about what he signed, and he's saying that he could implement a 10% global tariff. Explain how that would be different and how that would not violate the Supreme Court decision today.
Well, the Supreme Court today ruled that the tariff authority that the administration claimed under a specific piece of legislation was not in fact there. And what the first reaction of the administration has been is to claim that there's other justifications, other statutory authority that they can employ. And so what they've done is implement one of them.
Now, the
I was
going to say the Vernon Hills company that brought the Supreme Court case said that its tariff bill shot up $10 million in just 1 year because of the president's tariff actions. Do they and other businesses have any hope of getting that tariff money back? Because the Supreme Court didn't really address that today, did they?
Well, I think that nobody knows what the process will be by which tariff revenues are going to be returned. This was an in-principle decision that said that the claim that emergency powers justified these erratic and extremely high levels of tariffs was a misreading of the statute and a violation of the separation of powers. What will happen in the next steps? The first thing that's going to happen simply is chaos. In other words, nobody knows what other statutory authority is going to be implemented. Nobody really knows the process by which companies will receive monies back or whether consumers are going to receive monies back. I believe the governor has made a proposal that the three of us, as long as everybody else, gets $1,700. So we're going to have short-run chaos. All that, of course, is bad for the economy, and because uncertainty is the enemy of investment and the like. That said, if the tariffs are repealed, the best estimates, I think, are that there will be maybe inflation will be half a percentage point lower than it would be otherwise. The price level, in other words, won't go up as much. And per capita gross domestic product, one of the usual measures of economic activity, will be perhaps half a point higher.
Okay, I want to ask you this, and sort of going back at this issue of tariffs and the uncertainty that I think it caused for, obviously, the economy. There was talk about sort of chaos, creating some chaos, and the potential of these tariffs creating some chaos. Do you think that the Supreme Court decision that was made today will maybe erase some of that uncertainty and chaotic time that we saw in the last, 6 months?
It's a very good point. Leaving aside the chaos of the transition to what happens next, what is ruled out is the use of tariffs in what I'm going to say is an extortionary fashion. In other words, the idea that each country could experience tariffs threatened, tariffs proposed, tariffs revised in response to anything from claims of mysterious claims of unfair trade practices, which are never, have not been justified in almost every case, to complaints about their political positions. And all of that will disappear. So in that sense, there'll be more certainty in the economy. Now, that said, there is a long-run cost to the tariffs as they have been used that will not reverse even if this uncertainty is diminished. And that is that the United States has, for an undetermined but non-trivial period of time, damaged its international standing in terms of being a reliable, credible, trustworthy partner.
All right,
so
Steve,
if you look at what yes,
we are out of time. I've got to run. Thank you so much.
My apologies.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Thank you for being with us. Stephen Durloff from the University of Chicago. I'm sure we'll talk again. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.